Good evening. Welcome to the city of Opa-locka. I would like to continue this recessed second budget hearing. The final budget hearing was held on, the second budget hearing was held on September 22nd, 2021 for the city of Opa-locka. And it was recessed to be continued today, September 29th, 2021 at 7 p.m. With that, Madam Clerk, roll call.
Commissioner Bass,
I'm here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Taylor,
Here.
Vice Mayor Williams,
Here.
Mayor Pike.
Here. Vice Mayor, would you lead us in invocation?
Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for this day that you've made. Lord, we ask that you continue to keep a hand over the great city of Opa-locka and its residents.
All right, Madam Attorney, could you read item 5B?
An ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Opa-locka, Florida, approving and adopting the city's general proprietary and special funds budget for the fiscal year 2021 through 2022, commencing October 1, 2021 through September 30, 2022, providing for the expenditure of funds established by the budget, authorizing the city manager to take certain actions, providing for appropriation of all budget expenditures, providing for fees consistent with appropriation and amendment, providing for adoption of representations, providing for conflict and repealer, providing for severability, providing for an effective date. The first reading was held on September 15th, 2021. This is sponsored by the city manager.
All right. With that, do we need to redo the motion and public hearing, or will we get straight into the discussion? Madam Clerk or Madam Attorney?
I will defer to the city attorney.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
Whether or
question?
not we need to make a motion on this item, since we recessed this after a motion and a public hearing. Do we need to redo a public hearing and a motion to proceed on this item?
You can take public hearing. You don't need another motion. You're essentially in the middle of the motion.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Manager, I know that we recessed to give you the opportunity to meet with us individually and have further discussions about the budget. Could you discuss the options and things that came out of those discussions and how that's reflected in the budget now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I asked Mr. Robert Anathan, Budget Administrator, come up and he can speak on the deliberations that we've had during the multiple meetings that occurred this week and our options moving forward.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I would like to do a quick presentation first and then throw it open to get consensus on where we need to go. Is the continuation of the budget hearing. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Very quick agenda. Through the various discussions that were held over the first two hearings and also with the commission briefings this week, several issues have arisen and would like to address those for a moment, which I will do momentarily. I just would like to remind you where the fund balance was in the general fund at the conclusion of the meeting we had on the 22nd. And that's been changed again tonight on the basis of what was done by the CRA. I'll go through that in some detail very quickly. In the budget briefings that we held this week, we discussed open positions. We also discussed what were discretionary expenditures that might be available for consideration. During the course of those discussions, there were some discussions about possibly taking some positions out, adding some positions, possibly in public works related to beautification, also adding position for a full-time internal auditor. We'll discuss that very briefly tonight also. Issue review, there are two issues that have really leapt out during the conversation. One is police department. The chief will make a presentation on that. And there's a second one, beautification. I'll address that somewhat briefly. And then, goodness, the screen has disappeared. And then after that, having provided a series of options, and options is possibly different than what you're thinking about, but I'll explain this when we get to that page. And after that, hopefully budget adoption. Next slide, please. These were issues that came up during the various conversations, either during the budget hearings or in the briefings subsequent to the budget hearings. Issue of timing. The question came up, do we have to spend all this tonight? The answer is no. During the budget briefings, we gave you a list of positions that we recommend be filled for reasons that we're prepared to talk to. We also gave a rather comprehensive list of what I've labeled discretionary items. These are items that, do we have to do them this year? No, we strongly recommend we do them. The difference between having to do them and recommend doing them is they really break into two groups. One group is to provide the tools and the training and so forth to allow the staff to become more productive rather than the lean organization that's been for the last couple of years. And the second group is things that we're doing for the community, such as sidewalk installation, improvements to parks, park services. So long story short, does all this have to be done this year? The answer is no. Do we recommend it be done for the reasons just mentioned? Certainly yes. House Bill 1. I assume by this point, there's been a lot of discussion about House Bill 1. I assume at this point, everybody has read the bill, understand it fully. Very little of it. I read an 18-page summary today, or said differently. There was an 18-page summary. I read the one page that has to do with municipal budgets and so forth. I may be very naive, but it really is not as threatening as I think some of the discussion has been. I mean, when you boil down to its essence, what it says is that if either the local state attorney who covers this area or one of the commissioners from the dais objects to a reduction in your police budget, they can raise an appeal with the state. At that time, the quick mechanism is the city will explain why, will respond to the appeal and explain the rationale for the reduction. I mean, for example, if you spend a couple $100,000 on vehicles one year and you choose not to do it next year, I don't think that's going to rise to the level of ever getting to the state. And again, it has to be triggered either by the local state attorney or one of you folks on the dais there. So long story short, I mean, if you ever went forward and said, we really want to cut the police budget in half for whatever reason, that would probably rise to the level. But the variations year to year just do not seem to even begin to trigger that type of concern. So I'll just leave that with you. Budget focus. During the discussions, there was discussions, is the focus of the budget correctly? One of the primary growth is the police department. Another area is recreation, another area is public works. So that is something that you may want to think about tonight in terms of what final change, final modification you may or may not want to make to the budget. Sustainable organization. We have talked about an increase in staffing. We believe the revenue is certainly there this year to support it. The revenue appears to be there next year, but that is one of the main issues that we'll have to address this evening. General fund, available fund balance. That issue, there are two schools of thought of that. One school of thought is that given that the city is in financial emergency, it would be remiss to spend any more that was brought in during the course of the year. There's another school of thought, and it's supported by the state in their approval of the budget, that says you have limits on what you're supposed to have for fund balance. And again, we're just talking general fund at this point. And as I've just mentioned many times, given the size of our budget, the intended minimum balance for fund balance is meant to be $3.3 million, plus or minus $100,000. We believe, I've shared with us before, the fund balance going into, excuse me, fund balance going into fiscal year 22 is going to be in excess of $6 million, sorry. As I said, there are two schools of thought. One says that, you know, to get out of being under the state control, we've got to keep growing that as a sign of stewardship. And that there's another school of thought that says you've been running mean and lean for the last couple of years. You are certainly well in excess of your fund balance. The intent is to, and again, this is school of thought, the intent is that you should spend monies that are not on ongoing operations, but on one-time expenditures to get out of the lean and mean mode that you've been in and actually start to provide additional services to your community. So that is a discussion that has got to be had, and you'll have to come to consensus as to what you believe. We believe on the administration, and certainly the state believes that you should be spending fund balance to the benefit of your community. Police department is a focal point, and the chief will present a presentation on that. The beautification I'll cover very quickly in a page, and then open for discussion. And then we'll get, one last point. There's a school of thought that says whatever is done tonight really cast in iron or cast in stone the direction of the city for the next year. I will tell you, having been in the public sector for 20 years and in the private sector doing the same kind of work for many more decades than that, the budget is just a starting point. It gets amended during the year. The commission at any time they feel that they need to assessment of where the city has gone and where it's going, or has second opinions in terms of decisions made so far. If there's consensus among the commission, it takes nothing more than a commission direction to reassess the budget, open it up, and put whatever budget amendments the commission thinks appropriate. I mean, the staff obviously provides them on a regular basis during the course of the year as expenses develop, but if the commission believes we're going in the wrong direction at any point, they certainly reserve the right to open up. So long story short, at this point is whatever's decided tonight is a first step in a long journey. It is not the entire journey. Next slide, please. Just a reminder of where we left this on the night of the 22nd. This is a reflection without the CRE in there. We had originally been about 2.1 million. Because we had no CR in the budget, we picked up another $310,000 that the CR was originally going to fund. And I'm happy to say they've now funded again, and I'll tell you the impact in a second. We also had to pull out all of the community development involvement in that staff time, and that was a little over another 100,000. And there's a little bit of back and forth in terms of interfund transfers for benefits and so forth, not benefits, I'm sorry, for G&A. So to cover that, we had to take 125,000 out of contingency, take it down to 1,375,000. So as of this end of last budget hearing, we're talking about a fund balance of 2 million, essentially 2,500,000, based on the decisions made tonight, and also bringing back in your direction. Previously, if you remember, there was a purchasing official, or purchasing aide, I should say, on a part-time basis. You've directed that be a full-time basis, so I had to bring in another 33,000 that. But taking out the funding that we had picked up there of the 310,000, adding back in your direction to add another 30-some thousand for making the purchasing person a full-time person rather than a part-time person, and then some minor things with G&A. We're now at a fund balance of about 2.1, call it 2.2 million for the moment. So that's where we were. That's where we got into this evening. Is that clear? Long story short, we've got a fund balance at the moment of around $2.2 million. When I say fund balance, use of fund balance.
So just to be clear, this 2.475 number is going to 2.2.
Yes,
so
sir.
Saving us approximately $200,000.
Yeah, what we did is that did include $310,000 going over to the Safe Neighborhood Fund. The CR has picked that up. But what is not restored is that the new CRA plan makes no use of community development employees. So that portion of it stays. So long story short, yes, sir, we're at 2.2 million now. Okay. Next slide, please. This, unfortunately, we're not able to get to all of you, but one of the things that if there's a concern, one of the big items was the size of the organization. And was it sustainable? The administration believes it is sustainable, but these are positions that are open at this point, part of the FY22 budget. If the thought is you have to deal with the issue of, is it sustainable? We believe it is. You have to come to your own conclusion of whether it is or not. If it's not, these are some of the positions you may want to consider in terms of making adjustments to it. I'm not going to run through it. I will point out, I apologize, where the recreation aides, that's a part-time position, should have said that. So unless there's any question about any of those positions at this point, I will point out on this chart, it does say the person aide is part-time at 51,000 and change, close to 52, and make that full-time as $33,000 to that position. The others I will leave to your inspection very quickly. I will answer any questions certainly, and if not, then we'll move on to the second portion of this presentation.
Any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Davis?
thank you. I'm looking at the budget of these newly budgeted for positions, and I don't see any additional allocations within the Public Works Department. Is that still on the table to be able to, I guess, add additional hands within the Public Works Department to increase its efficiency?
Yes, sir. As I said before, in the various briefings and so forth, there were discussions about reducing certain departments. There's discussions about adding certain positions in other departments, including both Public Works and also an internal auditor. And again, that's part of the deliberation process that we have to ask you to go through this evening.
Got it. So just looking at this and, seeing really no changes in the police department budget and some of the other positions, I think it's very important that we balance, the new employees that we are adding, and that we, if not, I would be in favor of maybe cutting in half the 4 officer positions. Maybe taking 2 and using those allocations to, budget. I don't know what the starting rate is within Public Works, but I definitely think from a personnel perspective, the department definitely needs to be beefed up. So that's my position though.
Well, may I comment in
Sure.
2 different ways on that?
Mhm.
One, we're going to get to that point. It's maybe a trifle premature in terms of actually deciding what you want to do on staffing. Secondarily, roads and streets, due to the fact that and I think we talk Public Works, probably talking roads and streets. The budget has, from what it was last year to what it is now, has gone up by another 3 employees. So it's up to 8.5 people. So you don't see it here because that increase occurred during the course of the year. So again, you're certainly liberty to add anything you want, but I will just point out the staff has gone up by 60% over what it was over the budget that was approved for last year, or for the current year. So what I'd like to do is just finish some of the subjects that I had mentioned previously, and then we're going to ask the commission to start to come to consensus on a couple of issues.
So just so I'm clear, you're saying
Yes, sir.
that we're going to come back to this.
Definitely. This is just to create the framework to allow the decision process to be undertaken. Okay. Next slide, please. These are labeled as discretionary expenditures. It goes back to timing. Does all this have to be done this year? The answer is no. Again, these are recommended because we believe it will either improve the tools that staff has to use, or the training the staff has to use, or it will improve the community in terms of beautification, such as medians, sandblasting medians, installing sidewalks, upgrading parks and recreation facilities, upgrading parks and recreation programs, and so forth. So I've put these on a list, called them discretionary, not because they have to be done, not because we're not recommending that they be done for reasons of hopefully we've conveyed to you. But if it comes to the point where it's the commission will to start making reductions, these are the types of activities that you should be looking at. Some of them you can make go away altogether, such as vehicles. So I've got police overtime on that. That's a tough one to manage. It is $180,000. It's on the list. Things like that are very tough to manage. So it's a mixed bag in terms of what's available to you. This is one of 3 slides. Ask the next slide pop up, please. A little harder to read, but fortunately you have handouts, so you see what's on the second and third slides. And again, for those who were able to provide briefings this week, I think you've already seen these ones.
You wait on a response from us.
I was just going to say, if no
Any
questions, I'm
thoughts?
going to move.
You want us to give thoughts on?
No,
this, or
sir.
we're coming
What
back
I'd like to
this?
do could, because trying to bring the whole thing together through a decision-making process where you'll be able to address fund balance, you'll be able to address staffing, and to the extent that staffing doesn't directly address your fund balance issues, if you have any, then you have to be looking at this as well.
Okay,
So
so
it-
we're going to come back to this.
Yeah, well,
too.
definitely. This
Okay.
is just to create the
There you go.
framework
Go ahead.
for
Continue.
decision-making.
Yeah, continue with the
Okay.
framework. If there's no questions about this, we say that we want us to, if we have any questions on understanding these items.
Yes,
at
sir,
the moment, we're
exactly.
willing to,
If it's not
expand
clear,
upon it.
if it's not clear what it is.
And then later on, after all the presentations, then we'll come back to these things to make decisions. So we want to make sure we get clarity on this. We understand what's before us. And then once they go through their process, then we would make suggestions. So if you make any notes while you can, then we'll bring those back to make any changes at the point in time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And looking, I see no questions at the moment, so you may proceed.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And the one after that, please. What I'd like to do now is have the police chief make a presentation on his thoughts on what he needs for his budget to actually serve the community well.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commission, Mr. Manager. I've been asked, I don't know so if you have the presentation. So I've been asked to come up here and kind of evaluate the thought process that went behind the police department's budget and some of the things that that we're at least recommending. So first, I thought it was coming. So when I came to the Opa-locka Police Department, I have essentially 4 main core values: enforcement, being particular, ensuring that we're using intelligence-led policing, not painting on a broad brush, that we are utilizing the prolific offender hotspots to maximize the efficiency of our patrol operations, and research has shown that particular type of policing is much more effective. Engaging the community, knowing that a partnership is critical to the success of any law enforcement agency, including the Opa-locka Police Department. Environmental needs being important. That is the police department working in conjunction with Public Works, parks, essentially knowing that we can't arrest our way out of any violent crime problem or any problem whatsoever. And also realizing that a long-term approach, simply arresting an offender, not changing the environment or intervening at key moments in their particular development is essentially not as effective. And obviously in the administration, the goal is to have a properly trained, adequately supervised, and intelligently deployed law enforcement agency. That was essentially the parameters of which I went in to review the agency as a whole. Next slide. I apologize on that if y'all can see that, but just highlighting some of the things that have been done and carrying on with some of the activities that started 18 months ago, building on that momentum. We did utilize the stop station at Glorietta Gardens Apartments. Actually, in the mindset of decentralization, our street crimes unit operates out of that particular location. It not only increases police presence, but it also increases the amount of interaction that they have within the community. We did establish a canine unit, which I will show you later on in the slide is showing to be helpful. Obviously, the police fleet at the core of any law enforcement agency is and it's essential. The core element of any organization is when a citizen picks up the phone and dials 911, that there is an officer available to respond as quickly as possible, and then they have the appropriate tools, including a vehicle, in order to respond. We did obtain a $31,000 grant for a crime scene investigations vehicle. That vehicle has since been fully outfitted and is being used right now in conjunction with our criminal investigations division. We did get obviously the state grant for the 1.1 towards the construction and renovation of the police station. We are currently in negotiations with the PBA. And we did create a specific organizational strategic plan. That was one of the first things that we did. It is measurable. We're looking at quarterly reporting in order to ensure that we're accountable. We're also looking at so we can measure and gauge our levels of success. Next slide, please. So when you see on the left here, UCR, it's Uniform Crime Reporting. It's where law enforcement agencies in Florida particularly, we report any kind of crime to our FDLE, who in turn reports it to the FBI. So to be completely honest with you, coming into the organization, there were a lot of needs. One of those specific needs was being able to have actionable intelligence and having the appropriate data. There were a lot of holes and a lot of missing and miscounted information. That is still a work in progress, but I will say that we are making tremendous amount of strides in accuracy, so that way we can ensure that we're being appropriately deployed. So if you look at on the UCR for 2019, 2020, and 2021, obviously 2021, it is calendar year, so we still have a few months left to go. But as you can see, the gray is the 2021 numbers that we are trending down in certain areas. There are some specific crimes they call Part 1 crimes where we're having some issues with, but I definitely see a positive trend. However, in contrast to that, if you go to the right, what they call a calls for service, the calls for service analysis between 1920 and 21. 2020 was a pretty busy year, about 43,000 calls for service. 2021 currently we're a little over 25,000, but if you look, I did an estimate on projections of where we're looking at for the remainder of the year, and we're projected to be over the 2019 numbers. I'll say this, there was some, I know in the discussions, there was some question concerning the accountability and officers' utilization of what they're doing for time. I did a quick analysis on specific, the amount of officers that we have in staffing and the calls for service. Between 2020 and 2021, the average call per day per officer was approximately 17.35. So in a 12-hour day, that is a quite substantial amount of time that's being dedicated to responding to calls, which allows for a limited amount of time to do what we call proactive or preventative policing. Typically, the average, national average, we try to do is about 45%. The goal is to have about 45% of an officer's day free time in order to conduct proactive, preventative crime prevention, engaging with the community. As you can see at the current numbers with the current staffing levels, there's very little leeway as far as doing some of the outside processes and programs that we're looking for. Next slide, please. Okay. So the manager and I met a couple of times and we discussed, I'm all about trying to be efficient with the resources and being a good steward of the public funds. So we analyzed the organizational structure of the agency. And in that restructure, there are a couple of things that became blatantly obvious. First, there was a lack of direct supervision amongst the ranks. Since that time, my staff and I have had a supervisory exam and made significant promotions. But again, trying to be good stewards, we offset that by eliminating the corporal's position, a discretionary position for a more tested position, and those supervisors are currently assigned and are active out there. The other thing that we did, looking at the staffing levels, if I told you what was out there responding to the calls for service, we were able to effectively increase the patrol presence, actively engaging on the calls for service because of that number by 20% with a zero budgetary impact. But again, with the restructure between that and our criminal investigations, there isn't a whole lot of extra personnel in order to provide the additional services. So in analyzing our staff, I went through in that process with the community engagement, the level of engagement in mind, I came up with the 4 additional officers. And in my research, I did find that as here to get the levels from 2016 to 2021 at our current levels, or even with the additional levels, our staffing numbers will still be below the 2019 level, just slightly above 2018 and less than 2016. So essentially, we would be bringing us back or roughly close to our 2019 staffing levels. There was also some discussion about the Miami-Dade report, which I reviewed, concerning the number of officers per 1,000 citizens. So if I may elaborate on that just slightly. First off, even according to the Miami-Dade report, that number and that gauge for determining staffing levels is not absolute and is not completely accurate. As I mentioned earlier, first, part of that assessment was based on inaccurate information. The information that we have, the data that we have, which is a process we're trying to streamline through, which some of the costs are incorporated in there, is used in the evaluation. So that's one. Two, the number of officers per 1,000 is just one measure of many. A lot of it has to do with what kind of services the community is asking for, the needs of the specific area, the volume of crime. I will say this, even with the additional 4 officers that we're asking for, our numbers will still be less than the state average of 2.53. And just to demonstrate the variance in there are some agencies within Miami-Dade who actually have what they call a 40, I want to say it's 40.9 officers per 1,000 citizens. So you can see it's simply just a gauge of what the community needs and what's specifically going on in that one area. So next slide, please.
Excuse me, Chief.
Sir.
Do you have a hard copy of this presentation with these numbers that you can provide us?
I don't particularly have one, but I'll be happy to get it to you.
Okay, yeah, I would definitely. Speaking about numbers, would love to have that hard
Yes, sir.
copy. Thank you.
It was provided originally. I didn't know a copy needed today. I apologize for that, sir. Next slide, Nelson. All right. Okay. So knowing what listening to the discussions of the day on previous occasions, I do agree with you on a lot of the things that are needed within the agency. One of those things being specific policy, holding officers accountable for their conduct. I think it's important to have an appropriate framework, and policies and procedures are the basis of any conduct, from as far as how they drive their cars, how they respond to emergency calls, making arrests, and so forth. So the commission did approve the acquisition of Lexipol, which is a nationally recognized company with best practice policy, and is assisting the agency now as we speak in developing both best practice, nationally and state recognized policies and procedures moving forward as an agency. My goal is to the additional 4 officers, again, talking about the shift in personnel, the 4 additional officers that I'm asking for are going to be utilized exclusively for community policing. They're going to be responding to a community policing unit, utilizing alternate policing as far as models such as on bicycles. We have a lot of programs. I have a lot of programs in the queue right now that I would love to launch. However, again, staffing needs are kind of making that slightly difficult, from a crime-free multi-housing program, which, we have a few apartment communities in Opa-locka that tend to drive some of our crime numbers. PAL, but I get into that in just a few minutes. I'll reiterate on some of those things. So also trying to utilize leverage technology to increase our efficiency as an agency. In the coming days, probably within the next few weeks, I'll be presenting to the dais a proposition or information that we're trying to look to expand our ALPR, automated license plate reader technology program. Again, this is it'll be at no cost, mitigated through some other expansion of another program, but again, I'll go into that. So also the goal is to increase traffic safety, parking enforcement, reduce our traffic crashes, and I'll again ensure our officers are adequately trained, supervised, deployed, and then the development of agency personnel. Next slide, please. So again, here's a demonstration of the current organizational chart. And again, going back to the Miami-Dade report, in addition to the officers per 1,000 residents, a couple of other things that weren't mentioned. Specifically, there's a 22% daily increase in our city's population every day from businesses and workers. There are also approximately 30,000 vehicles that travel through our city on a daily basis. And, obviously with some of the anticipated growth and some of the impacts that violent crime has had recently. Next slide. Okay, so in addition to the 4 officers that are being recommended for community policing, I also recommended for 2 PSAs or public service aides. The goal is that a sworn officer whose duties are exclusive to their training, have them out on the street doing what only they can do, and replacing them with or augmenting some of their duties with non-sworn personnel who are much cheaper. So the PSA program, looking at what we have, obviously listening to a lot of the commission meetings, there are some significant parking issues, abandoned vehicles and so forth within the city. In one deployment that we did over a 3 or 4 day period, I know we had recovered or had over 100 vehicles that were found in violation. And that was just over a couple of days. Through what they call Signal 4 Analytics, which is a state-run program, we showed a number of traffic crashes, 6 of them with serious bodily injury and 3 fatalities. So the PSA goal, they'll be deployed. That was a question I was asked. They'll be deployed whenever our highest traffic fatality or traffic crash occurrences are. Usually they're split shift during rush hours, one working during the day, one working at night. The benefits of them, obviously, in addition to them being cheaper than a sworn law enforcement officer, they act as a force multiplier. So if we have a traffic crash that requires traffic control or traffic direction, instead of having a sworn officer out there working traffic, you can utilize a non-sworn PSA, which would allow the officer to go back and do answer other calls for service and be available again to conduct proactive policing. It'll obviously having more individuals on the road, they respond to traffic crashes in general, which will reduce our response time. So our citizens or those that are involved in traffic crashes should have a reduced wait time. And obviously it reduces our overall staffing costs and increase officer availability. Next slide, please. So the community officers, some of the programs that we have right now that are in trying to get launched is PAL. I've already spoken with our Parks Director, partnering with them. I have had meetings with some individuals and some businesses that are looking to assist us and partner with the organization and the agency to try to get that program and the Explorer program off the ground. Programs such as the Citizens Academy. I conduct neighborhood walks once a month myself, but increasing that. City events, obviously, y'all know we have a lot of events in the city, and looking at some of the overtime costs, a lot of those are related to specific programs and events that occur. Having a unit that's available to, essentially that is their function, to get out there and get to know the community members, that should have some or help mitigate some of that cost of the overtime. I have in my prior agency, I did have a blight unit and a blight initiative. So these 4 officers are kind of going to be divvied into specific functions. One of them being PAL right now as it stands, one of them being a PAL Explorer coordinator. The other one working on the multi-housing program, one working on initiating some of our reading programs, Pop with the Cop for the kids, Shop with the Cop, partnering with Big Brothers and Big Sisters as an agency, doing programs such as they call Protect, people righteously organized to eliminate crime together, neighborhood crime prevention meetings, and initiating, and another officer initiating or assisting with a blight initiative, a blight reduction initiative. Those properties that are contributing to or helping to facilitate some of the criminal activity that's occurring in the city. To date, we have about 4 or 5 that I've identified that we've been discussing trying to work on. So next slide, please. Next slide. And information was already there. That it? Sir? Oh, that's it. I'm done then. I hope that answered your questions. If y'all have any questions of me.
Any questions of the chief?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Davis?
thank you. I have a couple questions on some things that I thought should have been prioritized in the police department budget. I'll just kind of shoot down a list. So obviously we're budgeting for 4 additional officers. Based on your presentation, who will be assisting with community efforts in some of our blighted and high crime areas.
Yes, sir.
Looking at the budget, I must say I am a little disappointed to see that many of the programs that you spoke of, Police Explorer, PAL, as well as the Citizens Academy that that you spoke of, that those programs do not have allocations. In my opinion, I think we as a city oftentimes use our budget as a reflection of our values and the kind of things that we as a community see as important. And in my opinion, intervention strategies is just as much as important as, the kind of infrastructure. So speaking to the officers. My hope would be, in addition to, putting some sort of allocation into those programs, because I do feel that they're extremely important to our community. I would also, want to see like the operator. I know that was a point of contention, hiring an operator here in the city so that emergency calls, would not be rerouted to Miami-Dade County, ultimately resulting in a longer response time to our citizens. I see we budgeted for 4 officers and, an operator was not considered. Can you speak to, I guess, why the administrative decision was to go with the community staff as opposed to bringing an operator on board to, in essence, increase our efficiency in response time?
Yes, sir. So if I may, first, thank you. Most of those programs, in my experience, most of those programs that we're talking about that are in limbo have very minimal cost other than staffing. A lot of them do not, some of them do, but I've already worked on some partnerships and they also have some leverage in some other areas to not incur some of those costs to the city or to our budget. The other thing that I think that was important to me too is getting the program off the ground and getting a better assessment of what those particular costs were going to be moving forward. But again, a lot of those programs come at a minimal or no cost. But also, again, in my experience with the community policing, building partnerships, I've been an advocate for community policing since the 90s. And I can tell you that a majority of the success of the program has a lot to do with the relationships that the officers have with the citizens and local businesses and the sponsorships. I've already got commitment from a few of the local businesses that any specific needs, may be particular to events or whatever would be covered. I think that's important and based in the partnership, which is why it wasn't specifically funded in there. So as far as the operator, so we currently have slotted 4 operators. I can tell you based on what I see with the communications, we have an issue related to as it goes with the county, and our communications is broken between what we have now and the 911 calls getting routed to the county. So there were 2 options that I was looking at, sir. So one option would be to tie our dispatch system into the county's radio system, which would essentially eliminate any redundancy and would have direct lines to our officers. There would be no intermediary. We would not essentially need a local dispatch at that point. However, I will say that is at the current time, that is not an option based on the direction that the county is in right now. But it is definitely something that we're looking, I would be looking at when and if that does become available. It would eliminate a significant cost to the city while significantly reducing any, again, redundancies and eliminate and streamline that process. As far as going with a full-time or bringing the 911 response directly here to the county, I didn't do specific research into it, but I can tell you based on my experience, one, it would increase significantly the costs to staff that full-time and to hire the appropriate individuals and train them. But I also think that the impact as far as in the reduction would be minimal as it relates to the cost.
Okay, but you say the dispatch system into the county, that partnership is currently not available. That option.
The county right now, if my understanding is that the county is currently right now in the process of changing their particular dispatch systems. So for us to invest in the software that would be needed in order to directly link our CAD system with the county's dispatch. If we spent it, it would be basically for naught, because once they change, we would have to go ahead and reissue and redo the whole process all over again. So we're kind of waiting for that process to go through with the county. And then obviously that'd be something that we revisited, because again, I think as a whole, that would be our best option as a city and as an agency to both reduce redundancy and effectively maintain or improve our response times.
Okay. And also to speak about the programs, I know that, I mean, I guess you say the costs are minimal. I don't exactly know what that means. I know they are programs, in my opinion, that we should allocate funding towards. I know that they're, new startup programs, but I do feel that it's very necessary to put some seed funding, right, into startup programs. So just speaking from my experience in the nonprofit sector, I know, the traditional roadmap is to fundraise and to go after grants and ultimately donations. But we're not a nonprofit. We're a city with a tax base and residents who want services. And when we look at our budget and we have conversations with community members, I think one of the high points is like what is the police department doing? So I want to be able to say, our police department, we're allocating funds, we're putting our resources behind these programs because we value them. Our youth are important, and we see it as a need here within our city. So I hear the options. I do think I would like to see personally that analysis of actually having internal dispatch, because that's been a point of contention for years. The number of complaints that I've received relative to our police department's response time has been, it's been not good. So me personally, I would like to see those options in writing. And I do know that was a function that also existed here within the city through those years of 2016 to 2019. That seemed to work pretty well, at least during that period. And given this year's budget, where we're increasing those staff levels to those prior years, I think is very imperative that we also look at that option as well.
Yes.
So for the sake of the budget, I'll end the discussion, but I would like to see that analysis, and I look forward to addressing this in the first budget amendment.
Yes, sir.
If necessary. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yes, sir.
Any other discussion for the chief on the police budget?
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Chief, for the presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
We truly appreciate you being able to break down and analyze some of the questions that we had. My question is about the community outreach material versus the small amount that was given to the Police Explorer program. If the goal is community policing and outreach, why so much to material and not so much to the Police Explorers?
So the police material, one of the things that I've shown to be part of that funding would include, if we needed to, some of the other community outreach pieces if needed. However, I'll tell you, one of the things that was extremely successful in getting the community out and engaging them was, believe it or not, was the trinkets. The squishy badges or the squishy police cars, the car magnets, referral material. Usually we try to incorporate some referral materials inside, numbers to call, this type of thing was extremely popular with the kids, particularly during our walks. And again, my goal is any opportunity that myself or my officers can get out there and touch the community, talk to the community and engage in a conversation. If that gets the kids out, which gets the parents out, so we can have a conversation about what's going on within the neighborhood. I think it's an investment that's well worth it. I will say this, Madam Vice Mayor, thank you for bringing that question. I am already in discussion with, again, other entities which I mean, we haven't committed anything yet, but are looking at, they were offering to fully fund any marketing trinket type situations, which would free up that additional funding for any other program that we needed. So that kind of where that funding discrepancy comes from. I hope that answered your question.
It does, and I do agree with you. People do like stuff, free stuff. I think for me, and I know we're always trying to trim a budget. However, with the Police Explorer program, and I'm wondering, have we investigated or have we researched how much it would actually be to reactivate? Because really we're reactivating it in terms of uniforms for the kids, having a cap, being able to provide that for the police explorers. And of course, the material, because they have, I know there's a notebook and all that stuff that comes with it. So I just hope that we're not being so liberal to that particular program. I would like to see more being funneled into the Police Explorer program. Like, I wish somebody can find a picture of me in my uniform as a police explorer in the city of Miami, Opa-locka. I'm sorry, it exists somewhere, but you know, it's a great program. So I would like for that, because to me, that's building the bench to future, you know, officers that from here, live here, stay here, police here.
Yes, ma'am. I'm a firm believer in intervening. It's a lot cheaper to prevent something than it is to respond to it. So if we can get in good roads with the area youth, I'm a big fan of Explorer programs and PAL. So if there are specific needs, I don't have those numbers in front of me, ma'am, but I'll be happy to look into it and provide that information to you.
I just don't want to cheat ourselves.
Oh, no,
that's
ma'am.
all.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Any other comments? All right, Chief. No, one of the main things that when it comes to the increase of this police budget is the alignment with the assessment by Miami-Dade Police Department. Because there was a partnership between the city of Opa-locka and the county to do an assessment of our police, and they took a considerable amount of time doing interviews, surveys, to do this assessment. Where are we in that line by line review of their recommendations, where we are, and the timeline of implementation? What has been implemented, what has not been implemented?
So I do not have the specific list for in front of me, Mr. Mayor. I know in our budget discussion, you asked for that. I will provide it to you. I can tell you, based on what I have seen thus far, a vast majority of those specific recommendations are the ones that I felt were appropriate, have been met. And I will be happy to provide you with that, with the detailed analysis of in response to those.
So I am, and I would also want to call my colleagues for us to be careful in terms of making increases without that assessment. In reading this, I'm going to just read just one section of this. It says significant changes are needed in practically all aspects of the department's administrative and operational functions. Some changes will be slight, others more comprehensive. Some will take time, while others can be accomplished without unnecessary delay. A few may have a fiscal impact on the city's budget, while many can be realized without significant monetary consequence. However, no matter the scope, time, or financial impact of changes that may be forthcoming, the department and its leadership must first take steps to establish a firm foundation which change will rest. So with that, we know that responding to these findings are going to have a fiscal impact. Where would that be? Because this to me is on our number one priorities, is to review this information because it is pretty comprehensive and we've had challenges we've been experiencing in the police department administration, and we want to make sure this is taken care of. So I would personally like to see these things taken care of before we start doing all this other stuff that can also take away from addressing the findings in this assessment of our police department. So what's the plan? Because that's been talked about since we first got here, even before with the manager. What's the plan to make this stuff get done and to give us as a commission a clear understanding of what it costs, what those look like, and how that may change the nature of our police department?
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I can tell you without having the list in front of me, a couple of the key points that were in there. One of them was policy or the lack thereof of policy. That issue did have a financial impact and has already been approved by the commission, which was the acquiring of Lexipol and a nationally recognized, nationally based policy development. I know another finding specifically was supervision or lack thereof and supervision within the agency. Again, that did have a financial impact with hiring of supervisors or promoting of supervisors. But again, trying to mitigate some of those costs and effectiveness. Again, one of the key things with the organizational chart and looking at the organizational structure was to ensure that the agency had proper span of control. A supervisor of one person is not an effective supervisor. They're just an entity or a sworn member whose duties do not require them to be a supervisor. So the manager and I sat, restructured, looking at the organization to ensure that members were appropriately supervised. I know that was another one of those of the key recommendations in the Miami-Dade report.
Definitely. So I don't believe that we'll be able to come to a resolution tonight, which is why I think we should just hold until we get that. But I do want to address one that it does relate specifically to the positions. How many sworn officers do we currently have now?
45.
45. Okay. So on page 12 of this report, it says that for staffing and resource allocation, the department's 41 sworn positions are sufficient to handle the call volume and investigative workload. Changes in work supervisory schedules, as mentioned, and the allocation of personnel resources will provide a more efficient, equitable distribution of workload and enhance oversight in the patrol division. Overtime expenditures and sick leave usage need to be brought under control. The communications unit needs a coordinator. So in this, it says that in terms of sworn, we have enough officers, and actually we have more now, as you just stated. But there were two positions that was recommended in this section. One was a communications unit, needs a coordinator. And then later on in the document, it talks about we may need another investigative officer. Are those two positions reflected in this budget?
They're already on there. They're already in there, sir. So
And which positions are they under?
both, they're under the current existing organizational chart. So prior to my arrival, I know the manager and my command staff, they increased the criminal investigations division, added the extra investigator. And recently, in the most recent organizational structure, I added a services supervisor who oversees the comm center.
Okay, so yeah, those things we would like to know
Yes, sir.
We would like to know to see how that is reflected with this budget and these changes that we're making. And that's all the questions I have. The police. Anything else? All right, next section.
Thank you.
Two more slides, please. First one. We're going to be addressing slide number 10 in your package. Just allow you to keep up. One more. There we go. As I said, there were two major issues that I just want to take a little more time to expand on before we ask you to start your deliberations. That's city beautification. There are a lot of things going on, some of which are explicit in the budget, some of which are buried into other things such as contract services and so forth. I'll take you through it very quickly just to give you some sense of what's going on. The first one's recommended, certainly to get the proper culture established in the city. That would involve things possibly such as a beautification advisory board. I have seen that work in other cities and it works quite well. It's a group of residents whose mission in life is to really make recommendations as to how to improve the appearance of the city, even to the point of having award programs and something like that. Those are very small dollars involved in it, but it's been very effective implemented elsewhere. It would involve such things as a regular community cleanup drive at least once every 2 months and so forth. Again, costs like that are buried in the budget, so you don't see that explicitly. Illegal dumping continues to be a problem. We've talked about it. We have started a very minimal conversation with the county in terms of they have their own investigative services. It would be a vehicle for us to learn how they're doing it and possibly even getting some of their services. As I've said a couple of times, as long as we are using the county for illegal dumping in the commercial areas under the program, any items are liable to be there for up to 2 weeks, unfortunately. So it's a problem. We know it, and we're still trying to come up with ways to address it. That would include the cameras, which have yet to be installed, but will be installed shortly, and other things that we'll have to work up. Park appearance, I think it was mentioned very briefly in the briefings that we were able to provide to various commissioners. Within the 15 part-time park aides, 2 of them are specifically dedicated to park maintenance, appearance, and so forth. Plus the others will have that responsibility, not as a primary responsibility, but certainly as part of the responsibilities. So clearly the parks are going to look better. You've got other things going on like there. You've got a grant program that's going to improve the trailways in the Ingram Park. That'll occur next year and so forth. So park appearance is part of the overall city beautification, certainly being addressed. One real eyesore is the abandoned structures, the unkept vacant property. It's also where, unfortunately, you have some breeding of criminal activity and so forth. Up till now, it's been allowed to get to a certain point where it just ends up sitting there accruing fines and so forth. We're doing our best to get that accelerated up to a more legally forceful action, either by unsafe structure or possibly even try to get foreclosure to get some of these shut down. So that's a very important part of the beautification program. Poorly maintained properties code, you see an additional person recommended that administrator just to allow them to keep up. We're also going to work with them to improve their IT capabilities so that they're not quite so paper bound as they are now. So get some benefit from that. Canals, what's been done so far is to get the county to come back at least monthly to deal with the flotsam that's actually floating around. We're in discussions with the county to get them to provide services for the city's canals. We've been trying to get a cost out of them for 6 weeks without success. So again, another work in progress. It's buried in the budget. You don't see that explicitly as a unique line item. Gate-wise, there's been discussion about that, how they'll be upgraded. Swale sidewalks, those are programs that are all funded in the budget. Trees, come in two flavors. One, actually trimming the trees that are out there in the public right of ways and so forth. And also there are we have applied for various grants to actually accelerate or increase the number of trees. So that's being addressed. Should be pointed out in both the swales and the trees area. Under the code, that eventually becomes a property owner responsibility. It's never, as I understand it, it's never really been enforced, and that's something the commission is going to have to make a decision as to whether that's actually to be enforced or the city's going to pick up that responsibility going forward. But as I said, past at this time, city is picking up responsibility, moving that forward. City building appearances, talking about painting 3 of the park buildings as well as the city, the municipal complex. Community development gets involved in this in terms of each property. They've been trying to be very aggressive in terms of the plannings and so forth to make the city more attractive. Pressure cleaning is not in there as funded the way it should be. Increased staffing, as we talked about a couple minutes ago, you've already increased Rosa Street by 3 people. You've also added another full-time equivalent to your illegal dumping pickup team. And as also mentioned, increased staffing in parks for 2 part-timers to focus strictly on park maintenance. And historic building restoration, you've already talked to. This is just really to say, we did not give you a full itemized list and show you each item in the budget because a lot of this is buried in other items, but all this is activity that's going on in terms of city beautification. Long way to go, but certainly it's an effort that's being addressed. Next slide, please. I would like to say at this point, we have listened to all of you and we have synthesized a budget that's going to satisfy everybody. Unfortunately, in talking to each of you have your own wishes as to what you think needs to be done. Intellectually, it's impossible to come back with one size fits all and say, okay, we're done, let's all go home. What we tried to do tonight is break up the core blocks of what has to be dealt with and give you a framework to come to consensus, provide guidance. And the way I'd recommend doing it is breaking it into 3 parts. First thing I'd recommend doing is the question of fund balance. As I said, the state is very supportive of the way we're using fund balance, but you have to come to your own resolution as to what you think is right. The state says, yes, it's time to give back to the community. Yes, you're above your threshold. And the state recommends doing it. But again, this is something you'll have to address. Once you have, if you want to change what's in the fund balance, and I'll tell you right now, it's $2,182,000. And by the way, as we go through this, I'm going to be sitting here. Each change that you make, I'm going to bring in so that we have a real-time sense of where we're going. But once you establish what you think is the right fund balance, if you don't agree with the $2,182,000 that we have right now, that is going to set a threshold for your follow-on decisions. Once you've established that, then the next recommendation is staffing. As I said, there have been some discussions, so maybe we got too many people in police. We don't think so, but that's certainly your decision to be made. There have been some decisions made on maybe we should bring in a couple more people for beautifications, primarily in roads and streets. Again, certainly your decision. One recommendation was to let's increase the staffing by an internal auditor. Going to ask you to look at the positions that you have in mind, what we have offered, and if you think changes are appropriate, let's make them and see how that fits in with your whatever you might have decided if you decided to change the fund balance we're going to use. If after at that point you've done what you think is right in staffing, and if by chance you've changed the fund balance, and then there's still more that has to be done to get down to the fund balance level you want to get to, then we've got to go through the list of discretionary things or maybe other things that you're thinking of and start to back those out if that becomes necessary to get down to the fund balance level. So that is a proposal. I would have loved to come back tonight and give you the answers so we could all go home. But as I said, intellectually, it just wasn't possible because there's no consensus in terms of what a final budget ought to look like. So that's where I would recommend that we start, subject to whatever questions or direction you might have at the moment.
I heard 1 and 2. What was the third one? One was about
Well,
decision on fund
first thing-
balance, second was staffing. What was the third
Mr.
one?
Mayor, the first thing is to start with, if you're going to not accept the recommended fund balance, which is $2,182,000 at this point, amongst yourselves, decide what you think should be the appropriate fund balance. Secondarily, address the staffing.
Mhm.
To the extent you think there should be additions, subtractions, whichever. We'll bring those in on a real-time basis. I'm going to sit here as you go. I'm just going to keep putting the changes in, if any. And then if you've established a fund balance level, it's different from what we're recommending, then if you've done things with staffing that either add to or reduce staffing, and if you've reduced fund balance, and if the reduction of staffing is not sufficient to get to where you want to get to in fund balance, then you've got to go to the list of discretionary things, say, okay, we're going to cut the following programs as well to get you down to, if you do decide to go to a different fund balance level.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's start off this conversation. And first start off with the fund balance as reported. This budget put forth before us is over our revenues, and the expenditures will be over basically 2.1 million. So the discussion is whether or not we are comfortable with going over 2.1 million and using that much of our fund balance moving forward. I do have a question I would like to know. Are we clear about our debts? Where are we with our debts? And is any of these funds can be used to pay down our outstanding debts?
The outstanding debts come in a lot of different categories. We're talking general fund.
Not the bonded debts. I'm more so specifically talking about the debts to outstanding like contractors, so short-term debts, and specifically those dealing with the water, the changing of the water meters and the money we owe the county.
The answer to your question is it would be, first off, we're talking general fund, and water sewer fund is obviously a different fund. We are working on waters. The answer is it could be possible you'd have to borrow from the general fund to do it. We are looking at we've talked several times, there are very fundamental problems with the water sewer fund now, and we're working on trying to get that to a point where it can at least cover its operations right now. The answer is you probably could if that's the decision you want to make, but if you do that, then you obviously are cutting back on a lot of different programs that might otherwise move the community forward.
Got it. All right. So that's what my more recommendation. If we're going to go over, we should pay down some of our debts to reduce the burden on our water and sewer fund that we currently have in operation. Is to do that. And then the other part is that I am also, just as in the CRA budget, very hesitant to tap into those funds at the moment without approved audits that clearly detail where we are in terms of our debts and also our current fund balance. So that is my position. Anyone else state their position on this first item, fund balance and utilizing our 2.1 fund balance?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Davis?
thank you. I'm kind of there with you regarding our debts. Obviously, we want to get rid of some of that bad debt, i.e. The money that's owed to Miami-Dade County for the installation of water meters, as well as funds that are due to the state and red light camera and that sort of thing. I think we shouldn't be too alarmed at debt because it's obviously such thing as good debt, such as bonds and other liabilities that we may carry. I'm kind of torn in between though, Mr. Mayor, simply because I do think, since being duly elected with you in 2018, we were able to cautiously lead the city into financial recovery. But given, that we don't have exact numbers because we're not completely caught up with our audits, I understand your reluctancy to kind of move forward. I guess it's a tough decision, but I'm somewhere in the middle. I think we are at a point where we can definitely significantly increase the type of services that we are providing our residents. And I do think, now is the time and they do deserve it. But I'm open to any, I'm open to any cuts relative to fund balance. But I do think we should put something forward for our residents.
Oh. Vice Mayor?
Mr. Mayor. So I do think that not having the audits and having to see the numbers and run the numbers and having reports do stifle us. And I feel like it has stifled me at this very moment because we don't have those numbers that are crunched. However, and I guess this question would be to you, Mr. Mayor, but for the debt to go actually down, are you recommending that we trim off some of the 2.1 million to pay down some of the debt that we owe? And I'll let you answer that question in a minute. But then I also think that we are in a place here in the city, we're getting in a much better place that we can increase some services, some goods and services to our residents, because we've been kind of stifled and stuck in the same place with the same services. So it would be good. It would be great to see the movement happening. But my question then, and then I'll let the mayor answer. Are we still are the salaries still the same in this particular budget? That was my concern, and I didn't see it addressed.
There is money in contingency for salary increases. You got 2 unions that you're doing negotiations with right now.
I'm talking executive salaries.
And then once the unions are satisfied, then the rest of the population will be addressed. It's got to be done in sequence. We've got to figure out what's going on with the unions. There is a reasonably healthy contingency in the budget right now between the general fund and the water sewer fund to cover increases.
Okay, but that wasn't what was mentioned last budget hearing. What was mentioned was the salaries had nothing, the executive salaries were based off of our city manager. He was able to make those decisions. And then there was another arm, which were the union salary. So I'm isolating that. I'm talking about the executive salaries at this time.
There is no explicit increase in the budget for executive salaries. There is contingency for salary increases throughout the city, unions, and then otherwise.
But that's not what I'm seeing in the budget.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
That's not what I'm seeing in this budget. I'm still seeing the same. I don't see anything different.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question.
Madam Vice Mayor, no, we're going to fund balance and then staffing. I think one of the things we wanted to recommend is that we probably put a hold on all those staff increases that are not tied to those contractual obligations, and also restoration from the from the cuts. So would that conversation probably address some of your concerns?
Well, it would, especially since it's over, I believe I saw a little bit over 200,000 in increase of salaries. Is that correct, Mr. Anthony?
In which line, ma'am? Just in citywide, year over year?
Citywide is.
Citywide.
this was
That's
significant.
probably from the staffing more than any increase. There are no explicit increases built in for anybody other than what's buried in contingency at this point. So if you're looking year over year, are you looking at general fund or are you looking citywide? I expect you're probably, citywide is probably more than 200,000 year over year.
Okay, so I'm confused and I. 'Cause what was said last
Can I ask
meeting-
what page you're looking at? Page number,
Well, I'm looking at citywide right now.
citywide. Is there a page number
But
at the
then
bottom?
when you also go through each particular department, you do see increases, the same exact increases in executive level.
Not FY '22 versus FY '21, no ma'am. If you do, executive level, I don't think you do at the executive level. I stand to
don't
be
think-
corrected, but if you can tell me what page you're looking, I'll see if I can give you a better
Sure,
answer.
hold on.
They are numbered on the bottom, so
Yes, give me a second. $63.
got it. That would be human resources. Yes, ma'am.
Is that not an increase?
At the executive level?
Yes.
No, ma'am. It's the same dollar amount for the forecast and for FY '22. Does that make sense or?
No, it doesn't.
Well, for the forecast, it says $86,927. That's for FY '21, the current year. And for FY '22, it says $86,927. And then the right-hand column says no change. Yeah.
Just to, on this point, 'cause I feel the same level of uncomfortability with this item. Does anyone else on the dais have issues with the staffing increases?
I have Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Commissioner Davis.
I have a question as a point of clarity. Based off conversations at the last meeting, I was under the assumption when you, Mr. Anthony, referred to salaries, you referred to them as a contingency. So while it's being budgeted, obviously some are tied to contractual obligations.
Most of it, sir.
Right, most of it.
Yeah.
But we are also simultaneously in a period of collective bargaining with our two unions. So my question is, the numbers that we budgeted for the upcoming fiscal year, they're not, like, they're just continue, like, their numbers, right? There's no,
There is a guesstimate as to the impact of the union negotiations.
got it. So they're projections based on whatever initial negotiations is happening with. the
Yes, sir,
union. So they're
correct.
based on a
That's
real
correct.
number.
That's correct.
But it's nothing that in essence locks us in outside of the contractual obligation to those numbers. In essence,
Locks in what sense, sir?
locks in the sense that these salaries that we're budgeting, they're going to be realized in this upcoming year's budget, right? But you said it was you used the term contingency, which is
There-
why.
Yeah, there is a discrete line item within the general fund and another discrete line item within the water sewer fund called contingency. And for the general fund, it was 1.5 million because of the change in the CRA approach to how they're going to staff. It's now at 1.375.
Okay, so you're speaking of funding, not necessarily the salaries, that part of the contingency.
That's yes, sir. It's
Okay.
buried in those numbers. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
But again, if you can arrive at a fund balance that you're comfortable with,
yeah, I'm
the
real
general fund, I think that'd be a great starting point. If you think it should be different than the $2.182,000. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm
that-
definitely gonna come back to the fund balances.
Yes,
as
sir.
Number
Thank you.
one, wanted to, you want to come back to the staffing or do you want to move this right now, Vice Mayor?
If I recall, I had asked you a question in
Yes.
terms of the fund and then the debt
Okay.
balance.
So what I would like us to do is to allocate a certain percentage. If we're going to expend over our surplus, then if at least half, 30%, something like that, we're going to allocate. If we want to make all these changes, 2.1, either half of that, 30% goes to paying back our debts, whether that be red light camera debt, water and sewer debt, or debt incurred by any outstanding debts that we currently have. If we're going to use those funds above our current revenue. So that's the figure that I'm looking at to be comfortable and to show that we're being a little fiscally responsible with that.
Mayor, may I ask for clarification? I
Oh.
just want to make sure that I've heard you correctly. You're saying if you do accept the 2.1 million, you want 30% of that, which means,
At least, if
which
not
is
half, 30%. I'm
Yeah.
going to go for half. That's
Well,
my
I'll
thing.
use
I
half.
want to go
Okay.
half, but we would at least 30% to paying back our debts.
I'll accept your 50% for discussion purposes, certainly. It says that otherwise we'll have to make $1 million of reduction in things that we've recommended to you. So
Mhm.
just so everybody's on the same page.
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. That's what I would propose. We're going to keep it at 2.1. That's the question. You can think on it. I just want to answer your question.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, Commissioner Bass, you done? Vice Mayor? Okay. Commissioner
thank you. If I may, I agree with you that 30% or even more, because we do need to reduce a lot of the debt that we owe. So our partners, thanks.
Bass. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, may I introduce a point? The primary debt I think you're talking about is the possible funds that we owe to the state in terms of red light camera fees that we held on. We think that's somewhere in the range of $2.5 million plus or minus. That hasn't been really pinned down yet. If you do 30%, if you do 50%, you would be paying off half of that in 1 year. And I think everybody thinks that when the exact number is established, whatever it might be, that we'll be able to work with the state and certainly pay that out over a series of years, certainly not $1 million a year. So I'll just throw that for consideration.
Got it. Just for the reason being is one of the top complaints that I do hear from residents is the red light camera program. So the quicker we're able to pay that off, the quicker we can make a decision on whether or not we want to continue that funding. So that's one. But I also I haven't been clear on our short-term debt to any vendors, contractors, any of that. Whether or not all that has been taken care of. And the only debt we have is red light camera, Miami-Dade County, the water meters, and then also the bond debts.
Yes, sir. There's no problems with accounts payable at this point. With some of the changes we've made, most of our vendors who we've been able to get on blanket purchase orders get paid within 2-3 weeks.
Okay, so there's no outstanding at all. No one is owed, no contractors, no consultants. There's no one that we owe debt to in the city of Opa-locka over the past, that's a year, 2 years, or contributed to this financial crisis.
There is no significant debt. Typically, we've got 45 days to pay our invoices because of the state involvement. We may take 60 or 70 days some cases, but we're working through that. But I mean, other than 60 days to do pay the bills, there's no outstanding debt to vendors.
I would love to see that in writing. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Vice Mayor.
I think I have to push back a little bit on the 30%. And I'm going to explain to my colleagues my rationale. Over the course of what feels like months, but I don't know if it's weeks, we like what we've seen for the most part. We've had concerns, we've expressed them, but I think as a board, seeing beautification, seeing public work, seeing those action items that we've asked for, parks and recreation, those are things that we've been saying since I got on the dais that we wanted to see. And we see them in the budget. And so, I mean, and that makes me smile. However, cutting the, 30% is a lot. Like everything would have to be cut across the board in order to do 30. To say that we're going to, and I get it, because I definitely like to pay my debts, but if we can get that in writing, if our mayor is saying he would like to see that in writing, and I think that if I recall, he's asked for that, then how can we get that? How can we see that some of that debt is being paid or has been paid so that we feel comfortable knowing that we can move forward with this budget? But I will say, I'm not comfortable slashing 30% of this budget personally.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay. And it's, just to be clear, 30% of the 2.1.
Correct.
Got it. Commissioner Taylor?
Okay, I hear what everybody's saying with the 30 to 50, but slashing it, to me, yeah, I do agree with, we all need to pay our debts. But slashing it essentially will hurt our residents, because we're doing a good job, like Vice Mayor said, with beautification and illegal dumping and the policing. So to slash that, I don't think I can agree with that. Because the way that this, I understand the mayor's point and my colleague's point, but I don't think I can agree with that.
Mr. Davis?
Mr. Mayor, just as a point of clarity, which debt did you have in mind? Was it the red light camera debt exclusively, or were we also considering the water meter debt with Miami-Dade County, just as a point of clarity?
I don't have any particular preference. I will be upon a commission of staff. I just want to make sure that we are paying debts back with any extra surplus funds.
Okay, and I will say, I do think it's important to pay our debt. But it's also, as Mr. Anathan alluded to, it's common practice to work out a debt repayment schedule. I know, this is, to the mayor's point, this is debt that has lingered, for some time now, that being Miami-Dade County and the red light camera program. And the red light camera program has taken in revenue over the past 2 fiscal years, and we haven't, worked out a schedule. So I do feel like, it is of essence, and it needs to, we need to at least start having those conversations to be able to pay debt. As far as the level of service within the community, I kind of share Vice Mayor's point, which is, we kind of advocated for these things. It's not like, the managers and staff have proffered something that's not our intent. But I do think, we definitely need to, at least workshop the debt, and maybe we can, work out scheduled payments with Miami-Dade County, state, workshop it, and then maybe pledge, I don't know, whatever, payments we decide for this current fiscal year, working out some sort of debt repayment schedule and just addressing that in the budget amendment. But I defer, I see Mr. Anathan's at the podium, so I defer
Came
to
back.
his opinion through the mayor.
I may.
Yes, sir.
No, in terms of the county debt, that gets paid every month. That's not a question. There is a schedule there. We do have to approach the county about renegotiating that just because of the liquidity of the water sewer fund. I don't know how many times I've said it, that fund has got real problems. But at the moment, we pay back on schedule every month. So it's not county debt per se. There is a schedule in place that's being adhered to. The only open item is the unpaid fees to red light camera fees that were withheld up through, I think, October of 2019. We did approach the state. They did come back because there was some ambiguity of the exact amount that was due. And their response to that time is, go figure out what you owe us exactly. And then when you figure out, come back and we'll talk about debt repayment. They said they could not forgive it, but they said, work out what the numbers are and then come back and we'll have that discussion again. So message there is everybody recognizes there seems to be no urgency on the part of the state to get it paid off immediately. I'm not saying we shouldn't pay our debt, but it's a two-step process. It's going to take some resources, which is finance, which is horribly tied up with audits and so forth at the moment, because they're going to have to go back a lot of years and find out what came into us, what was paid up to the account, paid up to the state and so forth. So it's under discussion. It's not as though it's been swept under the carpet and the state has said, figure it out and then we'll talk. So that's really the only open debt that we're not addressing head on at this point.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and just for a point of clarity, we have a debt schedule for the county funds that we've owed since the beginning of this financial oversight. Do we have a debt schedule for the funds we owe for the water meter replacement?
It is in the budget at the moment. They haven't formalized it. There's been informal discussions all along saying, we think we'll reinstitute that as of January of next year. It's just been an informal conversation. The budget accommodates that. But again, it hasn't been finalized or formalized yet.
So the budget formalizes paying back the 2.2 million in how long, how many years?
5 years.
In
Same
5
plan,
years?
same plan as the current one, 5 years at 3%.
So, okay, because the current plan takes into consideration the start of payment, I think 2 years ago.
In August of 2019, I believe,
Yeah.
or maybe
exactly.
July, maybe June or July,
Yeah,
plus
2019.
or minus.
So does this 2.2 add on to that 5-year plan where we'll be done in 3 years? Or is it?
No,
two-
sir.
Or is it 5
5
more
years by
from
itself
now?
again. Yeah.
Okay, from now. So,
And it's in the budget, but again, water sewer fund, it's got to be addressed.
and that's my point, is that water sewer fund is suffering because of this level of debt. So
question
we
about it.
have to be able to basically provide it some support. And that's what I'm saying, is to make a contribution to where we can reduce that debt schedule so we can give some type of support or cushion to the water and sewer fund. So that's the point on that one with water and sewer, or also the red light camera, which if we have no plans of removing those red light cameras at any point in time, then we can wait until we come up with those numbers. That's something I've been asking for for at least 3 years, for us to get that number down. So that can wait a year if we have no plans for that. But if we do, then we need to start to at least allocate funds to pay that money off. So right now, I hear basically two saying we don't want to use surplus to pay off our debts, 2 saying we do want to use surplus to pay off our debts. Any changes to those two, or do I have
Mr.
someone who want to add on that?
Well, before the manager, I just want to state one comment. I know that the state, I guess the debt that is owed, of course, then maybe they have a different number than what we have as to, what exactly is owed. Where did those projections come from? Do we make, like, are we going off our number or do they have a different number? Is that the discrepancy as far as the debt service?
You're talking about red light cameras?
Yes, red light camera to the state of
To be
Florida.
very candid, the state didn't know they were owed money.
So we reminded them of the debt because we,
Yes, sir.
yeah,
They didn't realize it.
got it.
And we had a tentative number, but we knew that we didn't have the precise number down to the penny. Their answer was, go figure it out.
Got it.
And to be clear, when you say the state didn't know, our oversight board knew. It's the Department of Revenue for that, over that particular
Agreed.
program. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor,
Hold on, I think,
Oh.
okay.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, you good. Go ahead.
Okay. And vaguely, I remember we had a scheduled payment for the red light cameras. A couple of meetings ago, we talked about it and they said that something about they didn't know why we were sending the money or something like that. I vaguely remember that in the meeting, but I could be wrong.
Just for clarification,
Prior to
from
that, we didn't know.
October of 2019, they are getting their money on all new fees, all state
No,
fees. that
I'm
pass through.
talking in regards to the debt,
The unpaid, the county debt or the red light
the
camera?
red light camera, specifically to the red light
Yeah,
camera. debt.
I have never seen a plan in place recently to pay that back in any sort of scheduled way.
Okay, so the monies that we paid so far, we have a calculation on that amount.
You're talking prior to October 2019, I think?
No. I vaguely remember a meeting where we were talking about the red light camera.
Yeah.
debt, And it came up in a conversation where they said that somebody was paying it and they said, we don't understand why you're sending us this money and
I think that
we
goes,
don't have an amount.
I think that goes back to maybe 2018 or 2017. I have heard that prior city managers are trying to make some payments.
Okay, so my question is, do we know how much was paid so far based on what was paid in the past?
No, sir, we don't have the exact number.
And is
We
that
think
something
it's
that
in the
state
range
can
of-
Provide?
Say again, please.
Is that something that the state can provide?
State has no idea. They told us to go back and figure it out.
So we were sending money and we didn't keep a record?
So let me bring some clarity. Let me bring some clarity to the situation. Let me bring
Tell
some
me off
clarity.
a dollar, Lily.
All right. So there was a point in time where the city stopped paying the state based upon our contractual agreement, where there's a certain amount that goes to the service provider and there's a certain amount goes to the state and a certain amount that we keep. For a number of years, we weren't sending our amount to the state. And we just started to pay our percentage back, I think in 2019,
October.
paying that. So we have been paying our percentage based upon that agreement. So the outstanding unclarity is how much did we not send to the state in those years, which audit should tell us pretty clearly. But that's the outstanding debt that we are trying to figure out and wrap our minds around with that program. And this is an important conversation because a few years ago, we voted to remove the red light cameras. And then because of the debts, we voted to bring it back, the red light cameras to pay back that debt. But we just had, and that was 2 years ago, we haven't done that process of figuring out to pay that money back. So that's the, if I correct me if I'm wrong on any of those points,
No,
that's where we are.
Yes, sir. Just for clarification, is there consensus that the 2.128 is the right fund balance?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's all I
If-
want to know. Is there any funds that's going to be used to pay back debt? And two is 2.2, willing to use 2.2, the amount that we need. So I literally am 2-2 on that right now. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. I would suggest, because that is a complex subject, I think a workshop needs to be held, to discuss that, not stopping the commission from whatever you guys choose to do tonight. But I think that is a complex subject because you have various different types of debt. And I think that's something that would be probably more better suited for a workshop setting. So moving forward, we understand what the commission's priority as far as repaying debt early or not, and what that's gonna be. Let it be debt from the enterprise fund, debt, general fund debt, and various other things. And then there may be some borrowing of monies from the general fund to the enterprise fund for other items as well that may be coming into the forefront. So that would be my suggestion, but at the end of the day is the commission's prerogative. But that in this type of stage is very complex. And I just want to make sure if we do decide we're going to invest a certain percentage towards debt, I just want to make sure we're clear on what that debt is and if it's enough. And we're just not just putting a projection out there. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So the point is to decide whether or not we are going to use a certain percentage of our fund balance to pay debts. So I think that's a decision on the floor. How we do that through workshops or whatever, we can definitely make sure we make that happen. So come to 2-2. Somebody going to take away, somebody going to add. Commissioner Davis, I didn't get a very clear understanding of where you are with this.
I mean, I'm still somewhere in the, I mean, at this point, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I think we need to have a robust conversation about that. As I mentioned earlier, about workshopping it. You know, there is a such thing as good and bad debt. Obviously, we're speaking of some of the bad debt that we want to address. But I think, you know, for the sake of my colleagues and the sort of effort and energy that needs to be had in a conversation like that, I don't feel, you know, tonight's budget workshop is a adequate setting. So I'll be more in favor of workshopping the item and then exploring potential budget amendment options to begin to address the debt. But I'm here with you. I understand that you know, this needs to be addressed. You know, I also voted, you know, to bring back I didn't vote to take it away because I wasn't in office then, but I did vote, you know, to bring it back under the pretense of paying this debt. So I do want to see it addressed. I just think for the sake of tonight's budget workshop, you know, it's just not the proper setting to give the level of energy that is needed.
Okay, that's fine, as long as we are clear that as we approve this budget, we're approving it without any consideration of paying off for the debt. So that's fine. So that conversation is done. Next one is about the fund balance. Are we okay with using 2.2 million of our fund balance for all these services?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Yes, I am.
In favor.
all right. I descend on that one. So let's move on to staffing. So we're going to move on to that staff. Will you bring back up that staffing slide? As they bring up the actual additional staff, let's talk about those staff increases. So as Vice Mayor brought up, there was a request for the increases in staff salary over the course of 3 years, I believe. And we received a document that showed quite a few different increases. And I know during our last conversation, there was some uncomfortability about why those increases happened, what's going on. We were told that some of them are due to contractual obligations with the unions that we have. Some were tied to restoration of salary, and others were discretionary. So it's been put forth that, and I would just put forth, just for the sake of time, that all those discretionary funds be put into any staff increases that was going to be discretionary in this budget, which is not tied to a contract or to restoration. Be put into some type of reserve until we have a workshop to go into detail about those. That's what I will put forth so we can speed along this conversation.
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, if I may, it's already in contingency and I don't know what the exact number is going to be. So my recommendation is just to leave it in contingency with the caveat in terms of what you want to do about it going forward.
When you say contingency, that means that if we approve this budget, those discretionary increases will not go into effect until after.
There
the
are no
workshop?
discretionary increases at this time. None.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I
it's-
received a document that
Yes, sir.
showed Parks and Recreation.
Those have already been, those have been executed. They exist. Past tense.
And also in building the license. Too.
That was one for a promotion for additional responsibility. It
For
could be
what-
two,
so
could be
tell me
two.
this, how does
One
a
was
building
restoration.
director get promoted
I'm sorry,
to
say
additional-
please.
So you said a building, there was a building.
There
director. So
there
how
were
would-
two in there. One was for restoration back to, as part of the three people that were restored. And then there's a second one where the community development director, I don't know if I showed him, he received a promotion, but I think that's in community development. One you're talking about, I think is just the restoration of the building official's salary. But again, those,
So how did these increases happen without coming before the board? And increases in the budget happen without coming before? And how was that, reflected in our budget? Like, how did that work? 'Cause we
I
approved the
don't know
budget with
that,
salaries.
I don't know that individual increases are meant to come in front of the board. I'll put my head in the lion's mouth.
But we approve a budget for that literally says salaries and staff salaries and all those things.
Yes, sir.
So, wouldn't, if it's going increase, you're saying it was within the budget?
Because there were no actuals for compensation this year, even though I knew that there was an overage that's going to have to be addressed by budget amendment, until we did not have financial statements until probably a month ago. So even though I knew it was going to be over budget, I did not submit a budget amendment for that until I actually got confirmation by what I saw in the accounts. So that's my problem. I didn't do the budget. The planning model allows you to see that, but I didn't address it because of lack of actuals up to this point.
And that's my point. So we didn't have financial reports for this year. Those financial reports will let us know the budget to actuals. And if in those budget to actuals, period, we set a certain cap for salaries, executive, like it's here, executive, regular overtime, benefits, and all those things. We set that in this budget. So if there were significant increases to those executive salaries and benefits, that wouldn't come before the commission?
As I said, if I had a set of, I have a planning module that, let me say that two ways. You would not see it because what you're going to see during the year and what I would see during the year is a full year budget and a year-to-date actual. So even if you saw it, it would not be apparent to you that there'd been an increase in it. I did not bring in the budget amendment, even though I knew I was going to have to, until we actually had some actual, so I could make sure that when I did bring it in, I addressed everything that was going on.
So you're saying we approved those increases already through a budget amendment?
No, sir. What I said is the budget amendment is forthcoming.
Oh, so it went into effect and it's going to come before us
Yes, sir.
to approve it in a budget amendment.
Yes, sir. As we do all expenditures at year end, which unfortunately may be over budget.
All right, so I guess we'll wait till that time to address that then. I guess this is not the conversation to have that during the budget about staffing increases. So right now, you're very clear that the only increases in this budget to staff for 2021, 2022 are due to
Contracts.
union negotiations and restorations based upon what was happening, based upon a financial oversight, 2%, 5%, was it 8%, I think it was, those reductions. Is that what I'm hearing? And that's what you're
Let me say it
putting on
differently.
record.
The only increases that are in FY 22 at this point are those which are already required by contract. There are no increases in the wages line for negotiations. That's all sitting down in contingency right now. So the only increases you'll see in wages at the moment will be contractual increases of contracts that are in force at the moment.
Mr. Mayor, quick question.
Vice Mayor.
I know we had a paper that talked about the different increases and some of them were restoration and some of them, mainly the police department, was because of contractual.
Exactly.
However, the restoration, and I've been asking like for a very long time. I've never seen any document. If someone a year, 2, 3 years ago told me that $15,000 of my salary was going to be cut, then I'm sure I would have that on a paper. So it's almost as if we're saying restoration, but I've not seen any proof that there's restoration in the salary. I got that one paper last meeting
Yes,
and
ma'am.
it gave me a 3-year, but there's nothing anywhere that has ever said that these particular executive salaries went down. And where I'm confused, and I know Mr. Manager wasn't here at the time, that there's different cuts. If they're all
Yes, ma'am.
on the executive level, why some are 15 and one is 9,000? Like, it's confusing to me. So why did that happen?
We'll have to get the documentation for you.
But that's what I've been waiting for. I haven't seen
No,
it.
Ma'am, I understood you wanted to see the salary increase. I didn't understand you wanted to also see the reductions prior to 2019. So that's my problem.
So one of the things that, and just for everyone's context, one of the reasons why this is important is that we want to make sure there's a fair and equitable system for salary increases that have justifications apart. It's one of our operational findings. And we as a board during this budget conversation have some influence in that regard. And we want to make sure that those things, all the increases aren't going to the top supervisors, but it is also equitable all throughout. So we want to be very clear about that conversation. And that, I think that's the frustration that I hear, is we're trying to figure that part out and make sure that it's equitable. So any other conversation about the increases? All right, can we bring up the staffing again?
It's page 5 in your package while you're waiting, but I think it's about to pop up.
So Commissioner Davis put forth an amendment to have the number of officers, the sworn officers, from 4 to 2, and then allocate those funds to increase the number of ground level public works folk that can like pick up trash and do regular maintenance. Is that what heard Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
Is there any, I do support that. Is there any others that want to speak on that?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Taylor?
Mr. Anathan, you spoke to when my colleague asked that question, that you said the public works was already increased?
Sir, the FY '21 budget indicated 5.5 headcount for roads and streets. With the, currently, we're talking about 8.5. So there is effectively about a 60% increase over where the budget started last year. Plus, we doubled the FTEs that are assigned to picking up illegal dumping. So net increase from the starting point of a year ago is 4 more people involved in roadway related improvements.
So right now, we have an increase of already 60% in public works
Within roads and streets.
within roads and streets.
Yes, sir.
So then my question to my colleague is, are we asking to add additional bodies to that 8.5?
So I want to be clear. I don't know the details of the road and streets, but I know specifically we only have 2 people that go around the city to pick up trash, not the huge bulk illegal dumping, but just the trash that you see throughout the city. Only 2, and 1 truck. And what we're asking for is I know the public works director at the time said that number should be higher, could be higher to address that situation. So that is the particular point. And just to give a comparison, we have significantly raised the amount of people that do the maintenance and trash pickup in parks, significantly more. And parks are just a small little aspect of the city. So if we did so much significant increase in parks, why aren't we doing that for the people that pick up trash throughout the city? So that was the intention. That's what I asked. And I was told that we can use more people to pick up trash in public works.
Have another,
Commissioner Taylor and then manager.
real quick, Ms. Anderson. So are we asking for bodies or are we asking for a task change? Because, and then my next question will be, are those 8 people, positions that we have in public works, are they all filled?
Yes, sir. At the moment, they are. All 8.5 are manned.
Okay, so is there a way that we can either change task of the workers or cross-train our workers that they can both drive trucks and pick up trash?
I'm going
As
to
opposed to just the 2 people doing it? Because I understand beautification, but I also, I like safe streets. So for officers, and then I like the community engagement with the officers idea. So is there a compromise?
I think the 8.5 are fully engaged at this point.
So they're picking
Yeah.
up trash as well, and not just the 2 people?
Well, I can't say they're picking up trash. I would defer. I mean, they're doing a whole range of assignments. I'll defer to the Public Works Director.
Area Austin Public Works. Currently, the increased staff and level in Public Works are addressing our tree trimming and beautification aspects of the Public Works Department. We currently have 2 individuals that are picking up litter. That's not a part of the trash collection. It's the litter runs in all of our roadways. We currently only have 2 bodies engaged in that function. Until we get called.
Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Taylor? Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, I would say this, if that is the route that the commission is going to go, I would rather that the money get reallocated to other contractual services for public works instead of adding 2 bodies. Because you're going to, you have pending RFPs that are about to go out, and you're going to have some financial impact there. I understand that the concern of the commission is beautification. So I would look at that avenue as well. If that is ultimately going to be a direction that we're going to go in regards to this.
Mr. Mayor,
Vice Mayor.
Mr. Austin, where are we with the inmates having that? I know we've been talking about that. Is that something that's close nearby? Signing that contract with them, state of Florida?
Right now with speaking to the Department of Correction, there is a shortage of inmates that could spool up to make new crews for this area. Until such time, we are in a waiting
We
pattern.
can't share the ones at Miami Gardens at.
I don't
I
know.
literally just saw some
Yeah,
in Miami Gardens. I'm just saying, they can't just cross, okay.
I'm not sure of
I'm
their
just saying, why we
allocation.
can't get- we only 4 miles, okay.
So
Anyway, thank you, Mr. Austin.
at the end of the day, like I am tired of seeing our streets trashy with litter and our facility. I'm tired of it. Like, and I know there's a lot of people in this community are tired of seeing come into State Road 7. You see that a lot, like all over the place. And all we're asking is to figure out how to pick up this trash. We do our part as a city, and then we can do a marketing campaign or whatever for get other people engaged. But at the end of the day, we are not funding the people to go out there and pick up the trash on the same level as in other cities. And with this police thing, we will be over the recommended level already. Remember, it's say 41, we have 45. We're gonna add 4 more. So we're talking about 40, 49. So an increase in 2 officers is a jump in the increase, but we are doing, what we're saying is that we're not doing anything to pick up this trash. And I think it's important that we as legislators do something. And I hear the RFPs, and this RFPs is for specific things, maintaining the tree, the alleyways and things of that nature, pressure cleaning, but they do not specifically address picking up all the litter and trash that is around our city. And if we do not do that, it's going to continue to look trashy. So how long are we going to let our city look trashy? To me, that's the question. And whether or not we're going to do anything to at least address that incremental, like try to address that with this budget. So that's why I'm in full support of Commissioner Davis and this amendment of this, so that we can have at least take a step in that direction and balance it out. Like we're doing a lot already in other areas. So any other, so I heard a dissent from Commissioner Teller. Any others?
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, is the suggestion on the floor to reduce the officers to 2 from 4?
Yes, and use those savings to increase public works, trash pickup.
If I get,
Hold on, Commissioner Bass.
that's my exact thoughts, what you just said, so I agree with that. 2 and 2.
Got it. Want to state your thoughts, Vice Mayor? You want to state your thoughts on this? All right, so motion to Commissioner Day, you want to make the motion?
Yes, I'll put the motion on the floor to amend the police department budget, addition of 4 additional officers, to reduce that amount to 2 officers and reallocate those funds within the public works department.
For litter picking up and trash pickup.
For trash pickup specifically. So do you want me to specify specifically for personnel? I know the manager made a recommendation.
I think they can figure that part out.
Okay,
We
so we'll
it
just leave it
them.
open.
Yeah, yeah, as long as we got some people on there, that's all. You have
Got
a
it.
second?
Second.
Second, discussion? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Commissioner Taylor,
You would call me first, because you. I'm gonna go with no. I'm no.
Vice Mayor Williams,
I believe that you need the police when you need the police. I'm going to say no.
Commissioner Bass,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Mayor Pigot,
Yes.
motion passes 3-2.
Any other discussion on staffing?
Just quickly, Mayor, if I
Mhm.
get, in the frame before, I noticed where Parks and Recs has 15 part-timers. What parks do that cover?
Delvin Patterson, Parks and Recreation. So those part-timers that cover all three of our parks, Seagull, Ingram Park, and Shamonte.
Those are,
Go ahead,
those are all part-time?
all part-time
And how
positions.
many full-time do you have?
We have, including executive,
Mm.
or just the rec
No.
leaders, we have 3 full-time rec leaders.
3 full-time, 15 part-time
Correct,
for 3 parks.
correct.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Could you explain what will be the roles of those 15 and the schedules?
Well, as you know, our parks open from sun up to sundown. Most of those part-times will be with our programming, from our youth programs to our athletic programs. Just covering special events and just managing our parks, especially over the weekends. It's kind of hard for our part-timers to cover the weekends, so they'll be in our parks over the weekends, so our residents can see a face. Those part-timers will be there greeting them, deterring such activities, bad activities that's happening in our parks. They'll be there for litter picking, beautification, changing the trash, greeting, like I said, greeting our residents, and covering our summer camps, our out-of-school camps. So they'll be using a variety of ways for our park system.
All right, so with the passage of this budget, from sunup to sundown, or is it from 9 o'clock to 6 o'clock? Which one is it? Our
Well-
parks will have someone available, because I know sometimes, and is that 7 days a week? Or is it Monday through Saturday? Could you be clear about that part?
It'll be Monday through Saturday from sunup to sundown. So we have staff coming in the morning, then some of our staff will be closing at nighttime.
Okay, so Ingram Park will be open from Saturday from sunup to sundown, and we'll have a person there, and same for Seagull Park.
Well, currently
and Shabundi.
currently on weekends, our sites are open from 12 to 5, so we have staff there from 12 to 5.
Oh, that was-
The park will be open in the morning time and staff will arrive by 12.
Okay, so from 12 to 5, and
On-
then on Saturday.
Correct.
Okay, and on Sundays, the parks will be closed.
Parks are closed.
Okay, is that like policy that they gotta be closed, or can people be allocated similar to like Saturday? They open up the parks on Sunday.
Well, when I got here, the parks was closed on Sunday, so we just kept the same schedule. Parks was closed on Sundays. We was a Monday through Saturday operation.
Okay. If we're going to add 15 additional aides, I would love to see and be able to tell our residents that from now on, from sunup to sundown, those parks will be open 7 days a week. And at the very least, during this time to this time, they're going to have some type of representative to coordinate events 7 days a week. That's my particular preference with that.
Mr. Mayor,
Um, Mr.
that's what
Manager.
it'll be, sir. 7 days a week, sun up to sundown. we'll make sure that happens moving forward.
And what will be the staffing schedule for that? Will it be, so on Saturdays, it's 12 to 5, and then on Monday through Friday, how late will that person be there?
We'll be, like you just said, we'll be sun up to sundown.
So we're gonna have a staff person there, sun up to sundown, 7 days a week, on all 3 of our parks,
That is correct.
with the passage of this budget.
Mayor Pickett, just a quick question for
yeah.
clarity for me.
Yeah, 'cause that's a big deal. I like that, but go ahead,
Um,
Commissioner Bass, and then Commissioner Teller.
I'm hearing sun up to sundown. I'm a numbers person. I need time. Starting time, ending time, because when an employee clock in, we don't say clock in at, sun up, sundown. I need time. I'm a numbers person.
Yeah,
And
so-
apart from that, I really want to see how you guys gonna figure this out with 15 persons working 7 days a week.
Well, it'll be 7
I'm sorry?
a.m. to 8 p.m.
Ooh, okay. 7 days a week.
7 days a week.
Okay, but you just said that the park open on Saturdays from 12 to 5.
Right, but he said that he wanted it from sun up to sundown, so that's something that we would change.
So, Mr. Mayor, may I?
Commissioner Teller, you have something you want to add before the manager?
Yeah, before you say that, Mr. Manager. I understand what you're saying with the sun up to sundown to my colleagues. The schedule that you have, I think what you're saying that is the difference. The park is open from sun up to sundown, but there will be a person, an individual on premises from a certain time to a certain end time, right?
That is correct.
Okay, now, I'm about family life and, time and everything. I don't think you need a person there on Sundays from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I think the 12 to 5 is fine, me personally. And then when you talk sun up to sundown, remember we have time changes. So certain times of the year, the sun goes down to 6, certain times of the year, sun goes down to 8. So it's gonna be a dusk to dawn operation as far as the gate is concerned.
That is correct.
And then as far as staffing, I think what my colleague is asking, when it comes down to time management, not time management, but the timing, clock in and clock out, what time will they report and what time will they in?
Well, you
Monday to
have,
Friday.
you have some staff come in the morning, they'll clock out probably at 1 or 2, and then you have the other
No.
staff close.
No, probably. So tell us,
It would-
from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., a person will be at the park on Monday through Friday. From Saturday, from 12 to 5, a person will be at the park, Saturday and Sunday. That's what
Okay.
I think we're trying to get you to say.
Okay, yeah, so a staff person would be at the park, say for instance, if we open up at 8, one staff would be there at 8
No,
to,
no, say for instance, give us a time.
okay,
We open at 8 o'clock, the person's gonna be there at 8 o'clock, we close at 5, the person is leaving at 5. Give us
Right.
that.
so you have staff coming from 8 to 1, and then a second wave is coming from 1 to 5.
Mr.
Mr. Manager.
Mr. Mayor. Let us do the research. Let us do the research, and then we'll put this information out so I can have time to meet my staff to go over that. But I understand the big deal of hiring 15 part-time individuals and making sure they're properly utilized. So I understand your sentiments and your concerns. We will work on that. We'll sit down and come up with a plan and make sure we put that out appropriately based on staffing and making sure that we're able to meet all our other demands as well.
So I think the consideration that we want to be clear about is we're going to put this 15. We do want 7 days a week, park open, all of our parks. But then 2, the bigger concern about someone being there is if people have events, someone is there. And 2, that if they have an event, that park is clean before that event and is also cleaned after that event. And that's the key component, especially on the weekends, on Monday through Friday, when there are a lot of activities. We can also understand it being later, Monday through Fridays. But it will be amazing if, with the passage of this budget, we can go out and tell our constituents that our parks, all of our parks are open 7 days a week. They will have a staff person there from this time to this time. Yeah, that's really what we want to be clear about. Anything else from my colleagues? Okay. So, and that's what we're hearing now.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Any other comments and questions about staffing? All right, moving on to our discretionary expenditures. So these are discretionary. Any questions, thoughts, edits to this? I'll start. My first question is in relationship to the police discretionary funds and a consideration with HB1. So currently with these funds, how much in discretionary funding are we allocating to the police with the passage of this budget?
If I understand your question, you've got 5 categories of police. I would take overtime off the table. I should never put that in there. That's too tough to control at this point. So you're talking.
But that's still using our surplus though.
It is, well, it's part of the expense structure that results in a use of fund balance of 2.2 million.
Exactly. So normally that will be in our general fund, but
Yes,
we
sir.
are putting this into our discretionary fund.
No, sir. Well, it's in the, okay, I've created a problem. Discretionary only means that if we don't have to do it. And I should not have put overtime in there because that's a very tough one to manage, as you well know.
Mhm.
The other 4 that are in there. I mean, the other 4, records management, automation, it is really a step forward in terms, it involves imaging all of the records, which is a major step forward in managing your documentation. Can it be taken out? Yeah, and police will continue to exist or function at the level they're at right now.
My question was how
Yeah.
much total? That's what my question was.
Well, if I understand the question, I take overtime out of there. We're talking vehicles of 178 plus another 85,000. So it's roughly $260,000.
Okay, I have 293.
Okay. Stand corrected.
So with the passage of this, if we do this 293, based upon HB1 next year, we will also have to allocate another 293,000 to the police budget.
If I may, I'm going to disagree with you based on my reading of the law. Chief alluded to it before. We don't have to do anything in regard to HB1. The only time HB1 comes into play if somebody on the dais takes exception to it or the state attorney. And at that point, we would then respond to the state and explain our rationale. And as a point I made before, if you buy cars in 1 year and you don't buy cars in the next year, I truly don't believe you're going to trigger HB1.
Okay. All right. If you say that, that's on record. It is what it is.
Yes, sir.
So my other thing is about the vehicles. I'm seeing quite a few vehicle leases and vehicle purchases. I see it in police, code, parks, and also public works. And could you break down the reasoning behind why we need these vehicles in these departments?
Each of the vehicles has been assessed in terms of mileage, age, physical condition. And these were the ones that were deemed that should be replaced at this point. I think the only purchase one you see are 5 within the police department. I don't believe there are any other person unless it's a very specialized vehicle. Everything else is on lease.
And that's my concern, is that we're locking ourselves. So our budget is already over. And now we're locking ourselves into all these leases. for this, which means that expense is going to be next year, and
Yes,
the year
sir.
after next, and the year after
5
next,
yes,
and the
sir.
year after next. And I want to know why, like literally, are you basically saying that almost all of our cars need to be replaced and leased? And why is that just coming to our attention that all of these cars need to be completely brand new, leased cars, and that we need to pay for this for the next 5 years?
I think one reason comes to mind is because you didn't replace any vehicles for about a 5-year period. Second thing is the one I have had some exposure to, as I understand, the code has 4 vehicles that are truly deficient. In fact, I'll ask the Public Works Director to address that.
Area Austin Public Works. The vehicles that are being recommended for replacement have far outlived their useful life by more than 10 years. And replacing them will reduce the operational costs of those vehicles.
So we have 10 in police, 4 in code. Say a golf cart, we got a van. Say vans, is that 1 van or 2 vans in Park and Recreation?
2 vans in parks.
2 vans in parks. And 7 in Public Works. So that's what, 10, 23 vehicles. We need to have ASAP in this city with this budget, like this year. It's so necessary. That's what I'm hearing.
When you factor in the cost of maintaining them, sir, is the best course of action.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Teller?
I hear the concern with the vehicles, but I urge you to go look at Opa-locka's fleet. I had the opportunity to actually ride on the park's van. Our children ride in it and it's falling apart. One of the vans, the AC doesn't even work. Then I rode on the seniors van. The AC barely works. Public Works trucks are falling apart and half of them don't have AC. Our code enforcement trucks, they're sharing vehicles because they barely work at times. So I urge you, I understand what you're all saying, but I urge you to look at Opa-locka's fleet. We have to invest in ourselves. We say we're Opa-locka, we got to invest in Opa-locka. We have to look the part, but we don't look good on the streets.
I don't disagree with you, Commissioner Teller, at all. I've been there, I've rode them. I do not like them myself. I just don't like spending a lot of money like this so quickly. That's as simple as that, while we're in a financial crisis.
We got to invest, man. We gotta
And
invest.
so that's my thing, and that's why I'm going to be very clear about how this is going, because yeah, we can take steps, but taking leaps at this point in time, that's where I'm at. So y'all heard someone over here.
I have a question, Mr.
Um,
Mayor.
Vice Mayor and then Commissioner Davis.
Real simple. Why purchase some and lease the others?
The police chief felt that for the specific vehicles he had in mind, he could probably do better than the enterprise leasing program. It was his preference.
So because they're a specific vehicle, that's what I'm hearing,
They're,
the lease vehicles.
the lease ones are general ones. The other 5 purchase are for a specific purpose. And it was chief's opinion that he could probably do better than what was offered in the enterprise lease.
So we're going to continue to keep leasing and signing a lease for those lease vehicles?
Different
Because
types of
usually-
vehicles. This was his call.
I understand purchase, but the lease part, I'm not. Maybe the manager can explain.
And if
I'm
I
not.
may, the 5 that are purchased are coming out of the Special Law Enforcement Fund, which is a totally different fund from the general fund.
It's not the fun.
Yes, ma'am, I
It's just the
understand.
purpose.
Yes, ma'am.
that
I
I'm-
understand.
I didn't understand that.
So through the mayor.
Mr. Manager.
So how enterprise kind of works these government programs, you see the term lease, but actually at the end of the 5th year, the city purchases the vehicle for $1. So it's actually a purchase. They just call it a lease the way it's structured. It's structured like a lease program. But at the end of the 5th year, you pay $1 and either you trade the vehicle back in for a new lease or you pay $1 and the city owns the vehicle. So it's kind of structured different.
Commissioner Davis.
Through the mayor to the manager, as it relates to our, I guess, the management of our fleet, I was under the impression that it was a management decision, I guess, a while back to, to go towards the lease option. I think we were faced with, looking at our current fleet and investing in that, which would have also been pretty costly, as opposed to leasing the service out, ultimately saving us down the road on maintenance. Is that still the rationale behind the move to, I guess, incorporate more of the city vehicles on the current lease agreement?
Through the mayor. Yes, Commissioner. So what happens is because the vehicles are going through a lease program, there is a specific maintenance program. So the maintenance is covered through that lease agreement. So all oil changes, all preventative maintenance, any major repairs, all that is incorporated within the lease. Compared to us just buying a vehicle outright, and instead of us maybe not purchasing an extended warranty, those maintenance costs actually is coming out the city's coffers. At this point with the leases, we're paying a monthly fee, but all the maintenance and everything is included all the way up to the expiration of the lease, or to the point the city purchases the vehicle for $1.
Okay, so we do have, and is there a maintenance plan built in once the city purchases the vehicle? Because I think that's also a problem that we struggle with, which is ultimately being able to sustain and maintain, the vehicles and fleet that are currently in our possession.
Yes, at the end of the lease, if the city actually purchases the vehicle, the city can purchase individual maintenance plans for those vehicles moving forward if we decide to keep them.
Got it. Okay. Well, that was my only concern. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, regarding the decision to lease and the maintenance obligation.
So in terms of discretionary budget, I would like us to find some way to make a cut to provide for a internal auditor, someone that reports to the commission on basically the operational audit things. So as you know, with this financial oversight, we got into this because of challenges with policies, procedures, and proper fiscal reporting, audits, and things of that nature. And then on top of that, there was an operational audit that had all these 99 findings. So I would like us to proactively, this is though we have an external auditor to do our finances every year. We have someone that can make sure that each department, that we're following those policies and procedures we have forward, that there is a clear understanding of when these policy and procedures need to be updated, and that we're abiding by that, and that we as a commit, and then also that when we pass this budget, those things are being done as a checks and balances, so that we're clear that the will of the people is being executed in the city of Opa-locka, and that we have those checks and balances internally, don't have to wait externally. So that's what I would like to propose. And that's what was mentioned earlier by Mr. Anthony is for that position. I think it should be more of a consultant role than an actual operator that can provide that information to us. Any thoughts on that?
Mr. Mayor, can I ask for clarification on that?
Yes.
Did I understand you're looking for a consultant or a city employee?
I think we need a external party because
City employee.
yeah, I wouldn't, because it's City Point, that means they're
Well-
basically the staff, like, so they're doing
Yes, sir.
staff.
Well, if I can add to that comment, in the budget right now is $25,000 for internal auditor. Based on your direction in terms of taking 2 police out of the mix, putting 2 public works employees back into the mix, you saved another $34,000 just because of disparity in compensation. So you're talking right now, the 34 and 25 you have available to you at the moment without doing anything further. Like 59,000, I think, if I did my math right. So if you want more than that, then it would be desirable to find some other savings, but at least you have $59,000 at the moment going towards that.
Is that enough? I don't know the details of that I just laid out.
I would argue, use that as a first year to see how far it goes. And as we've said too many times, if it turns out to be a really productive relationship and the funds are insufficient, do a budget amendment.
Any other thoughts on that?
I just have one question, Mr. Mayor. I know based on our charter, we ought to have an independent, I think it's an independent audit annually. Of course, the internal auditor will, help with the processes and the controls and those
Exactly.
sort of things. But ultimately, I guess we wouldn't get credit for the, because we still had to have an independent audit, and the idea is not to have, someone that works for the city to complete the audit, if I'm correct, Mr. Anathan, regarding the what's outlined in the charter.
So
I think
that's
they're two-
fiscal.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
talking operations. That's the difference.
Yes.
Oh, okay, so operation, okay,
It's different.
Yes.
It's policy procedure. Fiscal is the accounting.
got it.
That's
Okay,
it.
so speaking of fiscal operation, thank you.
Any other thoughts? So right now, you're saying, manager staff, that you can allocate 59,000.
Yes, sir. You have 25 in your budget. You just saved 34,000 with your personnel decisions. So that would be 59.
All right, and so then we need to make an amendment.
Yes, sir.
So I would like to make a motion to amend this budget to increase, what's the position and where is it at here?
It's buried in other professional services, but just indicate an increase in external auditing services will be sufficient, I think.
A increase in external auditing services to use the savings from Public Works, police Public Works savings to increase that external auditing, and also to have the duties that I was outlined earlier in this commission meeting. Have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Teller. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Commissioner Bass,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Williams,
Yes.
Mayor Pigott,
Yes.
motion passes 5-0.
All right. Any other discussion on the budget? All right. So before we vote and close out this.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
There were, because of the CRA, as we talked about before, there's some other things that you have to approve to further modify the budget as opposed to what was presented on the 22nd. So if I could just read off, I think from CRA, each one has to be addressed separately.
So we do need to approve the CRA budget.
No, sir, but that impacted the general fund. For example, when we took the CRA out.
I got you. I got you.
Okay,
Go ahead.
fair
Rick.
enough.
You good.
So one recommendation I would ask you to approve is the contribution to the fence project of $60,000. CR has picked that up so we can take that out of the general fund. So what I'm proposing is that you authorize a reduction in the transfer to the Safe Neighborhood Fund of $60,000.
Do I have a
I get-
motion?
I'll move it, Mr. Mayor.
Moved by Commissioner Davis, second by Vice Mayor. Discussion. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner Baz,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Mayor Pygott,
Yes.
motion passes 5-0.
I've got three more, unfortunately. Second one, very similar, is a reduction in the transfer to the Safe Neighborhood Fund of $250,000 from the general fund.
Do I have a motion?
Move it.
Moved by Commissioner Taylor,
Second.
second by Commissioner Bass. Madam Clerk?
Vice Mayor Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Baz,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Mayor Pygott,
Yes, and
motion
just
passes
for the
5-0.
record, these motions that are made by, that we are making, is taking what, Mr. Anderson said and moving into a motion. So by, those who move it, just so we're clear, because usually the chair got to restate it. And I'm gonna go through that. So,
Two more. First one is because the CRA is now back in place or in play, there's certain G&A transfers that get modified. So there's an increase in the general fund transfer in by $5,735 and a reduction in the transfers out by $13,638.
I have a motion,
Move it.
moved by Vice Mayor Williams,
Second.
second by Commissioner Bass. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Baz,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Williams.
Yes.
Mayor Pygott,
Yes.
motion passes 5-0.
And if I may, one more once. The increase of the purchasing aid to the purchasing official, from a part-time position to a full-time position will add to the budget $36,765.
Motion,
Move it.
moved by Commissioner Taylor, second by Commissioner Davis. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Baz,
Yes.
Mayor Pygott,
Yes.
motion passes 5-0.
And I would personally like to thank one and all for going through a very tough process. I certainly appreciate the help.
Thank you very much. And we have, just want to be clear, we do have two workshops that we said we wanted to do. One about the debt and one about the staffing issue increases, all right? Or they can probably be combined. But I want to make sure that those things are moved forward. Any other discussion on agenda item 5B? Madam Clerk, roll call.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Baz,
Yes.
Mayor Pygott,
Yes.
motion passes 5-0.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Moved by Commissioner Taylor,
Second.
second by Vice Mayor Williams. I want to thank all of those involved in putting together this budget, from the staff, the management, the commission, to all the people. It's what we have to do to make sure that we move forward as a city. So I want to thank you for being patient with this process as we do the will of the people. This meeting is adjourned.